Hello, my name is Nora Lusk, and I will be presenting my policy analysis paper about caring for sexual assault patients in the emergency department. The policy that I chose is from my current emergency department. It's where I work. I'm a charge nurse there. I'm also trained as a sexual assault nurse, however, I'm not certified. And that is part of my problem statement regarding hospital policy as it pertains to sexual assault nurses who are certified versus nurses who are trained versus nurses who are not trained, and what that looks like for a patient victim. Emergency rooms are typically the first point of contact for patients in crisis regarding of what kind of situation they're in, whether they've been hurt, injured, or it's some kind of illness. Usually they present to the emergency department and they're being taken care of, and nurses and staff have been trained to care for patients in a variety of illnesses, injuries, and so forth. This typically is not something that's covered in a regular ADN or BSN. It might be touched on, but it's not something that's specifically trained for sexual assault. So some nurses go through and get the training and then do not move on to be certified, which is fine. This is a policy taken from a very rural area. This is where I live, is in northeastern Nevada, and it's from Northeastern Nevada Regional Hospital. And this policy does provide the scope and purpose and why the policy is in place to utilize by the nurses. So it's more like a roadmap and serves as a guidance tool to get through taking care of one of these patients that presents to the ER, especially for the untrained nurse for sexual assault patients. The policy was written in 2019, so it's a very new policy, and it's the only one of its kind available at the hospital and the only one that's ever been written to my knowledge. So as I said, it's a rural hospital, and just like any other community, there are definitely barriers to care, especially in this pandemic. But in a rural area, it's a little bit different because oftentimes somebody in the emergency department may recognize the victim. They may know who the perpetrator or suspect is. So it can be very difficult kind of to navigate. So confidentiality becomes a very big issue here, and in getting people to report. So knowing that there are nurses that are specifically trained for sexual assault might help prevent or break down one of those barriers. Part of the significance of this is, like I said, it's a guidance tool used by emergency room staff nurses. We want to mitigate errors that are not just medical and psychological, but also for forensics in this patient population. I live out in Nevada, so the Nevada State Board of Nursing put out a position statement that stated that nurses who are not certified are able to, it is within our scope of practice to take care of these patients. So therefore, just a regular nurse who doesn't have any training, it is in their scope of practice, so they will be required to care for these patients, which can be very daunting. So looking at the literature review, I did a SWOT analysis on. I did 5 articles. Like I said, the Nevada State Board of Nursing, I did the practice or the nurse practice decision that they put out. Looked at a study that was completed in Illinois, which looked at emergency departments that are the front line for this kind of patient, and they did like a needs assessment of what they needed to do in their ER to get staff feeling more confident caring for these patients without using the 40-hour online training that's required. They condensed it way down, and it showed really good results. The 3rd article was by Patterson and Resco, and they used a blended learning, and they did this with modules and shortened, condensed face-to-face and of instruction and clinical experience. And that also was a really great article, in that the staff was able to feel like they were able to care better for these patients. The 4th article was a pilot study. They looked at using more simulation and mannequin use, and it was geared more specific to nurses that wanted to be PRN SANE, so they really wanted to be SANE nurses, sexual assault nurses. That's what a SANE nurse is. So their ability using the mannequins and feeling like they had more hands-on made them feel like they'd be better prepared to care for this patient population as well. And the last article I did explored, it was by Adams and Halton in 2018, and explored who makes up that sexual assault response team and how to collaborate among team members to prevent sort of that infighting and kind of stay in your lane situation, and kind of spelled all that out, and how it affects the care of sexual assault survivors in an emergency room setting. And they showed that the more collaboration and open and honesty that there are on the team, and the more training, made that team work out a lot better. So that also broke down barriers as far as care and the ability of the nurse to be able to care for these patients and feel confident about that. So the recommendations that I had come up with were that non-certified and certified emergency room SANE nurses should be included in that first line of care for the patient who's been sexually assaulted. And this hospital policy does provide the guideline of care and references, which I thought was really awesome. So the only thing I saw that it really lacked was that it needed some kind of roadmap or clinical pathway, if you will, that kind of showed what to do and what not to do, and sort of like an algorithm like we see in like BLS or ACLS, a clinical pathway, just so those that are there and a patient shows up, they're not scrambling to read an entire long policy, they can just follow that algorithm. Some of the implications here is the cost for training is quite high and can be a barrier for some of the smaller rural facilities like mine. So SANE educated and certified nurses can be pressured to join the response team, and they want to expand their outreach to the community, but further research really needs to be indicated here. Like, there needs to be a lot more research regarding this, because forensic nursing really is a brand new career choice or path for nurses, and it involves so much more than just your medical team. People who don't know medical jargon, it also very much so involves them. So in conclusion, that analyzing the newly adopted policy that I had found for basically a relatively non-existent sexual assault program in a rural community really does exemplify the need for further research in the field, especially in rural areas. Sexual assault nurses have been found to either be certified or non-certified. As far as policy and procedure is concerned, it's best not only for the facility but also for the patient victim, that ability to care properly for the patient, utilize trauma-informed care that isn't necessarily in some of the other training as far as medical personnel is concerned. Policies should be used as guides or rules within an organization, and many staff members will look to decide on how to proceed when approached with specific situations such as sexual assault patient care. And the policy should be easily referenced and should be a guide and should absolutely provide that clinical pathway as well as references, so that nurse that's not trained can just pick it up, look at it, and kind of know what to do. And it does make easier for the facilities to kind of run drills or practice with staff nurses who haven't had official training on what to do and how to properly care for these patients. But again, this is a ongoing nursing pathway, and there will definitely need to be a lot more research involved. So I'm excited to jump on that bandwagon, and I hope you guys are too. Okay, have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening.